everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Sportsbook Confidential. I'm John Sullivan, coming to you live from the FingerLicks1.com studios in Seneca Falls, New York. And this little show here is to help you learn and grow as a sports bettor. And we've got lots of stuff to talk about today. As I always do, before I get going, I just want to point out that we have a call-in line, 866-315-FLX1, extension 810. Send us your comments, your feedback, whatever you would like to talk about. And please remember that if you do call, we may play your call on the air. So we always welcome your feedback. And let's get started. So like I always do, starting out on our show, I update my bankroll, and last week was one of my worst weeks. Not my worst ever. I think I had an 0-5, but we went 0-3-1 last week. We had two hockey plays on Friday. The Blackhawks money line was a loser, although they've played very well. That was a loser for us, minus $22. We had the Ducks +1, and that was a push. They lost by 1, so there was no change in our bankroll there. And then we had Cornell +7, and they lost by 9, and then minus $22. Then we had Iowa -7. They went to overtime, and they won by 6. But we were lucky to get even that far, but lost by a point, minus $22. If you do the math, that's minus $66. The new bankroll, $584. And dividing by 30, as we always do, gives us a new bet size of $19 going forward this week. So today's sportsbook lesson, as I've done in the past few weeks, not last week, but before that, we've been talking about different statistics and how we can eventually use these statistics together to build a model and use that model to help us handicap games. And I want to talk about a basketball statistic today, and that basketball statistic is called player efficiency rating. And player efficiency rating is a stat that was originally developed by an ESPN guy named John Hollinger, and it is a measure of a sum of a player's positive statistics minus his or her negative statistics, represented as a number. And the formula is actually rather complicated. You can go on basketballreference.com, and they have a whole page there dedicated to exactly how it's formulated. It's got about 15 lines of pluses and minuses involved. And but basically, it's a number that usually, I like the LeBron James, for example, has led the NBA in PER like 6 times, and his number, his rating number is usually around 30, 31, 32, or 20, somewhere between 27 and 33, just to get you an idea of what a good PER rating is like. So, so every player on each team has a PER rating. So how do we use that to handicap? And you can basically, if you're handicapping a ball game and you want to test one team's strength versus another team's strength, well, you can just take the PER for all the players on each team and, you know, come up with or at least the starting 5 or whatever, and come up with a rating, a team rating, sum of each, quick and dirty way to do that. You can also prorate player efficiency rating over minutes played, and that is really more to test the strength of the benches. If the teams are very closely rated and you want to see which bench players would be more likely to have an impact on the game in a positive way, you can, prorate the PERs of all the bench players. Because you look at a team stats, you can see the average minutes played for each player and whatnot. And remember, you have to account which players are healthy and which ones aren't, in the lineup or not. So one of many ways to measure strength of a team, obviously PER is in my opinion, is way more effective in measuring professional basketball than it is in college basketball. I guess in my opinion, college basketball players are pretty much pros anyway, but because they live, breathe, eat, and sleep basketball. But the players are much less experienced, and the coaching level is not the same in college basketball. Mistakes are often made, mental errors, and player efficiency rating I don't think does a great job. I mean, obviously your turnovers are a factor in PER, but there can be coaching mistakes and things that are just not accounted for in a player efficiency rating. So I definitely lean this towards more of a pro basketball type. And if there are similar stats for football or hockey or baseball, one of the universal stats for all those sports is win shares. Something we can talk about down the road, or VAR, value above replacement player, those types of things. I may be talking, a foreign language to some of you that don't like to deal with the numbers end of things. But once we, get a solid group of stats that we've discussed, we'll go ahead and try to put together a basic model for beginners and see if we can't use that to help us handicap some games. So very interesting stat, I think. There's many more to be talked about, and we'll get to those as time goes by. So that's it for our sportsbook lesson today. And we have actually, even though it's Friday and there's no football, there's actually quite a bit of games going on tonight. And I'm going to do a little in-depth on the NHLs. We've got, 8 games going tonight. And the trade deadline is over with. There were a lot of trades, but there were not a lot of big trades. I think Mark Stone, Duchesne going to Columbus and Mark Stone going to Vegas were probably the two biggest in my opinion. Not much goalie movement at all. So teams basically were standing pat, I would say, except for Columbus. Columbus decided to keep one of their players that was a pending UFA, and two of them actually, Bobrovsky and Panarin. So they're going all in with what they got, and technically they're just hanging on to a playoff spot. So there may be a chance that they might not even make the playoffs, even though they traded up for some very good pieces. So let's get started. Flyers at the Devils. Flyers minus 129 at Devils plus 117. Devils are playing out the string. Their best player is Taylor Hall, which just underwent surgery. They traded away Keith Kincaid, although they have a good young goalie that's come up. I really like the Flyers here. They're fighting for a playoff spot. They've been very competitive lately. They did trade Wayne Simmons to Nashville, but I like Carter Hart. He's been thrown into the fire and has done very well for a rookie. This is a fair price for this game. It doesn't really excite me, the odds there, but the Flyers are definitely the favorite in this game. Moving on, we have the Penguins at the Sabres. Penguins, again, are another team fighting for a playoff spot. The East is very balanced. There's some good teams that are not going to make the playoffs. I'm afraid the Sabres are pretty much out of it. They're 8 points out with about 13 games left to play. You don't know what you're going to get with the Sabres. Their goaltending is actually decent. They're lacking scoring depth, and they're lacking defensive depth. They need 2 good defenders and probably one more scoring line to really be a competitive playoff team. You got to like Pittsburgh in this situation, especially if Matt Murray is playing. He's been pretty much lights out. If Casey DeSmith goes tonight for Pittsburgh, I would probably stay away from that game. But I do like Pittsburgh at those odds. Canadians minus 123 at Rangers plus 111. Rangers actually have been playing well, and Georgiev, the backup goalie, I feel has really excelled in the last month. Henrik Lundqvist can always put up a good game at any time, but he's getting up there. Rangers have some good young players. that are not mailing it in right now. Canadians are sitting in a playoff spot, and Carey Price has been very good this year. He's not the world beater he's been in the past, but he's definitely an above-average goalie. Game's about appropriately priced. I think at about 125, I would take a flyer on the Rangers if it was plus 125. It might get there if Georgiev starts, and I think that's a sneaky good play. We'll have to see. Capitals 102 at the Islanders, minus 108. Islanders obviously are first in their division, playing very well. Lehner and Greiss are the goaltenders. They've had good years. They have good scoring team, offensive defensemen. It will be interesting to see if a team tries to take a very physical approach to the Islanders, how they do in the playoffs. As I've said all year long, I know that by some metrics the Capitals are not as good as they were last year, but the Capitals are good. They've rested their players. They know what they're doing in preparing for the playoffs. I like the Capitals. I always say the Capitals at plus money is a good bet, and I like the Capitals here on the road. Maybe it'll get over to the plus side. Minus 102 is pretty much even money. So like them there. We'll have to see. Then you have the Blues plus 106 at the Hurricanes minus 117. I've bet a lot against the Hurricanes this year, much to my detriment, because since the first of the year they've been, along with the Blues, one of the best teams in the NHL. I'm still not a believer that they have the goaltending to carry them through the playoffs. They do have a very talented offensive team, but I also feel like this is a team that has lacking size and physicality to carry them through a 7-game series multiple times. The Blues, on the other hand, have really their goaltending is what put them over the top with Binnington. If he plays tonight, I really like the Blues at plus money. I feel like they are just, even though their 11-game winning streak is over, they're still the better team here with the right goaltender in goal tonight. Predators at Jets. This is pretty much evenly matched. It's pretty much a pick'em game as far as money lines go, because the Sportsbook takes a little vig out, so minus 104 versus minus 106. The Jets have struggled offensively, and the Predators just added Wayne Simmons from the Flyers. Although it's considered that the Predators have better goaltending here, I think it's pretty much even. I feel like the Jets have played a little better as of late. Obviously, since this game is lined pretty much evenly on both sides, almost no reason to take a side here because the teams are pretty evenly matched. Vegas minus 155 at Ducks plus 140. You have the Ducks that are mailing it in the rest of the way, which is sad for players like Getzlaf and Perry and Kessler, because they know they're not going to make the playoffs, and they're getting up there. Vegas will have Fleury in goal tonight, so that makes them pretty much a big favorite there. Ryan Miller's played really well for the Ducks. He's been a backup role, and they have not given him as many starts as I thought they would down the stretch. So Vegas is obviously the favorite here. They scored 5 last night, and then they won in the shootout for 6 goals, technically on the scoreboard. They can put goals in the net. So if Boyle, the rookie, starts tonight for the Ducks, Vegas minus 1.5 looks really good tonight. And then the Avalanche plus 146 at the Sharks minus 162. The Avalanche are playing really well right now. The Sharks are also playing well, and they're tough at home. Martin Jones is a good goalie. I feel like this game is priced really good to take the underdog Avalanche here at 146. If it gets over 150, you definitely really want to take a look at that, because I expect this game to be pretty close, whether or not the Avalanche do win here. 146 is a pretty juicy number. There's almost no reason to take the Sharks in this game at minus 162. Just too heavy odds to get much of a return on your investment there. So that's the night in the NHL, and we have, and it's interesting, the next couple of days, we have 7-8 games every day until Monday. Things are really heating up, and we should know in the next 2 or 3 weeks where the playoffs stand. So coming down the stretch, it'll be interesting. There'll be a lot of important games, and next week we'll have, as we transition into college hoops here, we'll have March Madness as the conference tournaments before the NCAA start. So on Fridays when we tape the show here, we'll have conference tournament games, and it will be a very exciting time. We'll have basketball pretty much all day, every day for for March all the way up until the NCAA starts, then every day over the weekends. So very exciting. So right now for Friday, there were no Power 5 conference games going on tonight, but we do have the 21st ranked Buffalo Bulls at Miami, Ohio. Ohio's 8-point underdogs, 154 is the total. And for those of you that haven't watched, recently I have said that I'm avoiding college basketball totals because of the juice on both sides is too much. So I'm staying away from those. But Buffalo, for all intents and purposes, is the favorite here. No injuries. Both of these teams score pretty well, so I feel like that over could be a possibility, but again, I'm staying away from that. I think Buffalo can cover this 8. They've blown certain teams out. They're a good free throw shooting team, very doable. So we'll see where that ends up. And then we've got the 4 Ivy League games tonight. As you know, the Ivy League plays their games on the weekends, Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays. So we have Columbia at Brown, Brown -4. Columbia, I feel like, is competitive, and 4, it may be not enough points to take Columbia here. The big difference between these two teams is Brown is an excellent free throw shooting team at about 79%, and Columbia is about below 65%. So I just can't, in good faith, take Columbia +4 here. Brown -4. If you feel like they are the better team, I think if you take away the free throw shooting, these teams are pretty even. So I really staying away from that game, but Brown should be a slight favorite here. Cornell at Yale, Yale -11.5. This is Yale at home is definitely the favorite. 11.5 is just too many points for me to lay on Yale. Cornell has been very, they're about 500 on the season, but they've been very competitive, slightly above average in the Ivy League. That could come down to free throws at the end. I really don't want to touch this game either way, but 11.5 is a lot of points. Once you get to like 12 or 13, boy, you're really looking at taking Cornell there. But things have happened. Penn at Harvard. Harvard -4.5, 140.5 is the total. I feel like this is a competitive game, and Penn is getting 4.5. I feel like they will make it very close. Unfortunately, once again, it's just not enough points for me to take the dog here. I think you're looking at like 6 or 7 points to take Penn. Another slightly worse free throw shooting team than Harvard. Again, you need that extra 2 points in the spread to really feel comfortable about making a cover there. I think at a 3.5 or a flat 4, Harvard is a decent play. Assuming the odds are right, they're not weighted heavy that way. But I expect that to be a competitive game as well. And then finally, Princeton at Dartmouth pick 137, and Princeton is an extremely talented team that's been very inconsistent, and if my memory serves me correctly, they've had like 3 overtime games in their last 5 or something ridiculous like that. Princeton is this game is evenly matched, and Princeton is the better free throw shooting team. I feel like they're the better team overall, and just have not found that consistency they need to book those extra wins. So I like Princeton in this game, and we will see where my picks end up. But before we get to my picks, I have a couple of gambling news, sports betting news items that I want to share with you. Some serious, some not so serious. And let's take a look at those. I'm going to start with this one impacts us locally. So I want to show this to you first. DraftKings announced on February 25th that they have entered into a partnership agreement with Caesars Entertainment. Obviously, Caesars Palace, the company that runs Caesars Palace brand. And multi-year deal includes online gaming market access, events, and new revenue streams. And it's the details are not they're kind of sketchy right now. But this is interesting to me because what is important in this deal is that that Caesars runs Turning Stone properties and DraftKings runs the Del Lago property. So for those of us in the Finger Lakes and Central New York area, we have both of these two companies working together. Does that mean that all of the sports books are going to become DraftKings sports books? Does that mean all of the online betting, when it does happen, is going to be DraftKings betting? Nobody really knows at this point. If they were separate companies, you could have separate sets of odds to look at when betting. It would give you choices. You might get a better number on a game from one book as opposed to the other. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's something to definitely keep an eye on as we get closer and closer to sports betting here in the region, as I expect the sports books will open in another month or so. And then our second item is actually, there's a conference on sports betting today in New York City, and this was posted this morning. And Gary Pretlow from New York State Assembly says to the audience, 150% convinced that a state can add online sports betting without a constitutional referendum. Governor Cuomo has not said much about opposing online betting. Governor Cuomo has previously stated that online betting is unconstitutional. And the powers that be, most of the pundits believe that without online betting, that the state will suffer revenues because they feel like the majority of sports betting will happen online. And they don't just want the brick and mortar casinos to happen. Since we're close to a casino, I don't really care either way, but it's very important for a lot of the parties involved that online betting happen. I don't know what's going to... I feel like the brick and mortar casinos, my opinion is the brick and mortar casinos will open, and then in March or April, and then by June, when the next legislative session ends, we will have a path to online betting. Whether or not it happens right away, I think is more unlikely, but we'll see. And then finally, on a lighter note, unless you were the person that was involved in this, Super Bowl squares. A lot of people play Super Bowl squares. I don't, because there is no skill involved, and I don't feel like there's any edge whatsoever. But a gentleman ran a Super Bowl square contest, $50,000 worth of Super Bowl squares, and he can't pay up on the $50,000 worth of prize money, so he perpetrated a fake kidnapping of himself, and his story unraveled, I should say, very quickly, as the police looked into his claims of being abducted and duct taped and roped, and he is being charged with various crimes, including faking a kidnapping. And bottom line is, if you play Super Bowl squares, don't play for high stakes. And if it was me, I wouldn't play at all. But know who you're dealing with, and caveat emptor when it comes to that kind of stuff. I feel like if you're going to bet sports through a reputable sports book, one that's licensed and regulated, I think you'll have no problems. So that is it for the show today. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Before I leave, I want to say a special hello to my brother Scott and my brother Tim and my new brother-in-law Scott, as they have their wedding today. And next week we'll have some March Madness for you. So lots of college basketball to talk about. And I'm going to play the outro music, and let's get some winners here. And thanks for watching. Take care, everybody.